Stay humble, make something.
All right. So welcome to Introduction to Edge Profiles for the Austin School of Furniture and Design with Mr. Philip Morley. So we're going to be covering edge profiles in this class and answering any questions you have related to that. So for the main duration of the class, we'll put all the questions in the chat and then I'll kind of moderate those and ask them to Philip. Towards the end, once we kind of finish the main portion of content, then I'll let you guys unmute yourselves and we can just kind of ask questions, hopefully civilly, but we'll open it up to the masses. So without further ado, Philip, if you want to kick things off.
Yeah, hey guys, appreciate you all being here. It's kind of awkward not being able to actually talk to you, but hopefully you can hear me. So Austin asked me to do a class, and the last thing I wanted to do is some type of class that I'm not very proficient at. So he mentioned, edge profiling, how I treat my edges on pieces of furniture. And the way I like to think of this class is it's somewhat of yes, it's about edge profiles, but also transitions. Now we're not building a piece of furniture, so I'm going to be focusing on showing you a few different profiles that are somewhat, almost all the same in a way, but I'm going to show you some router bits that I like to use, how I like to use them, and then show you doing them by hand. But there's nothing worse than sanding than watching someone sand. So I'm not going to try to go too deep into that process, although I do want to emphasize the sanding part of it is what makes my edges look crisp and look good in my furniture. It's the time that I put in with the part that I hate doing. It's the sanding part, but that's what makes it or breaks it. So it's kind of about hard lines, keeping those hard lines and transitions. And I wanted to kind of show you a piece that I did. It's a very, very simple piece, but I just thought of it just before we started this. And I thought this is a great piece to show more as like a case study about transitions. And for me, anytime that I build a piece of furniture, I believe in less is more, and that's just my aesthetic. Doesn't mean it's right. It's just what appeals to me. But when I say less is more, I don't mean so much so that it looks like a piece of furniture from IKEA, which I have a lot of furniture from IKEA, so don't get me wrong. But where you strip it down so much that it looks so manufactured. So that's where I do like to throw in a lot of fingernail, thumbnail, edge profiles on my pieces. That it's a very simple detail that doesn't scream out at you, but it shows that the craftsperson put the extra effort and time and was thoughtful about the design. And just a simple edge treatment on a case piece, on a little T-rack, you could leave it flat, it would be plenty nice, but then add in just a very subtle detail like that kind of elevates it, to me, to the next level. But whilst doing that, try not to overdo it, because you don't want to take away from the overall piece. Usually I'm looking at it as something that someone, as they get closer to the piece, they're going to discover these little subtle details. So that's kind of what this is going to be focused on. I'll be doing a bit of a hybrid method too. I am not romantic about my woodworking. I try to do it as fast as I can, but doing it safe and precise. So if that's a combination of hand planes and belt sanders and joiners, whatever gets me there the fastest, then that's ideal for me, because time is money, but also it has to come out well. So this is a piece. Let me see if I can actually grab my phone. I want to take it out of the holder here real quick. Let's see. I'm going to turn this camera around. Sorry for the close-up of my face. There it goes. Substool and a notion of what it was going to be. I had the overall shape. But then by simply adding little profiles, and then talk about like transitions, like how does this top die into this, and then how does this, the slats relate to this. And so just by adding this nice little profile edge here, really kind of elevates it, and just it just adds a lot to it without taking away from the overall design. But then continuing that language, so it's through here, and now you can get carried away. And then on the end grain here, it does the same. And then on the bottom stretcher, very subtle, but it has a full thumbnail on that. But it just all kind of relates together. And so that's what excites me about furniture making is those little, that language that continues through a piece, and trying to balance that. So I'm going to show you a few ways that I like doing these profiles. This is just a very quick stool that I made just before I headed out to go teach. It's actually, you step on it. It's a little step stool to get into my Airstream. So it worked out well. But what's kind of cool about this bit is you don't have to use the entire, you can use parts of it, and it's got a center bearing. So if anyone has ever done, sorry, something popped up on the screen. Hey, Austin, let me know if I'm glitching out, because my screen is glitching out.
Yeah, it seems like your internet's going down a little bit.
Just keep going. Are you there, Austin?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hey, can you hear me? Hey, Philip, can you hear me?
Huh.
Philip, are you able to hear us? Hello, hello.
Hey, you there?
We're here. Are you there?
No, something glitched out, didn't it? Resume recording. Or did you pause? So the recording is you doing that, right? So that's nothing to do with me.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the computer, but it just paused. It just froze up on me.
All right.
But you can, okay, the phone's fine? All
yeah,
right,
we can
we'll
still see and hear you from the phone.
Okay, good. Yeah, just check in once in a while, because as I'm rambling on, I noticed that, it was just quiet. So I'm not sure where it left off.
Basically, we didn't hear anything about the router bits. If you want to start.
Okay, good. Okay, so that's not too far. Okay, so yeah, so these are a few router bits I use. This guy here, and I'll get Austin the info on this one. But it works really well. It's neat because it has a center bearing. And what I like about it is you don't have to use the entire portion of it. Now, what's nice about the center bearing, if anyone's ever done a bit like this, where it doesn't have any bearings, and you set up a fence, obviously, to do this, now it's kind of like a joiner, right? So when you go to edge join a board, the outfeed of the joiner is making up the difference of what you just took off. So if you go to profile, use this profile, and you take the entire cutoff, but your outfeed fence isn't making up that difference, you'll get a big old snipe on the back, and it can scare the hell out of you. So a lot of times when I use bits like this, I actually leave a little flat on the front. So I don't try to take that full radius. I leave a bit of a flat, and that way it's always riding up against the fence. So I'm going to show that a little bit later, actually in the table, so it makes a little more sense. And then, just a regular old 3/4 roundover. But the way I like to use this is I have a tilt-in shaper, and instead of using, I don't want this profile, but I actually tilt it and use a portion of it. So in a case like this drawing here, something like that would do it, but tilting it at a 45 or whatever that has to be. So that's getting into more shapers, and that works well. I just did a class at Mark Adams, and I forgot a bit, so we had to use this. And instead of, they didn't have a tilt-in shaper, but we built a ramp at a 45 on the router table. So that worked pretty well for that. So these are ones that I use, I don't know about often. Like this one, I don't use that often at all because it's just too deep, and it just looks too manufactured in a way. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the reason I like a lot of times doing it by hand is because you can get like a more of an asymmetrical look. And this is one I do a lot on my dining table. And so when I do anything like this, I'm not really thinking about the numbers. I just scribe it with my finger, the offsets. But I always give guidelines. So I'm gonna go ahead, quit talking so much, and see if I can just show you an example. So I'm just gonna put this back in my little fancy phone holder I just got today. Thank you, Amazon. Let's see. All right. So I've got a real simple piece here. It's just a little shelf, and you can kind of see that profile there. And so that's what I like about it, doing it by hand, is you can kind of make it what you want, right? So you're just trusting your eye. Where if you used a bit like this straight on, it doesn't look very good. It looks okay if you're doing a staircase type work, but that doesn't look very good to me. Now, bigger ones of this, and I'll show this later, you can just use portions of it. You don't have to use the whole bit itself. So something like this, I was trying to show it with a wax pencil that didn't work very well. If you just got one, go at it, do whatever you want. But if you've got multiple, and they should look somewhat the same, you need to be methodical about it. So meaning your layout lines. And so when I do something like this, I'll simply have the stack in front of me, and then I'll just kind of figure out center. I'll scribe that line just using my finger and do that to every single one of them. And when I say they have to be exact, you're never going to line these up to each other, right? So this is in a piece, they're going to be 12 inches apart. Unless you've just done a horrible job, you're not going to notice the little subtlety of them being a little bit different. So when I teach, I try to get people out of that mindset, like absolute perfect. By eye, it looks perfect, but if you matched it, it probably isn't. It's done by hand, but I still want it to look very crisp and clean, if that makes sense. But I will set up and I'll just scribe these offset lines, and I'm just really doing what looks good to me. But you do want some guidelines. And so that's what I'm kind of trying to show here, is like I have the center line. I don't get caught up in getting my calipers and trying to find dead center. I'll simply, I'll grab the board. I'll set up what I think is center, mark it, flip it, mark it. In between those two lines is my center, and I can just set my pencil to that and go. So I don't need to, worry too much about it, spend too much time on that. So for a part like this, I'm probably just going to go at it with either my block plane or just a smoother. I really do like this dude, this rasp. And so this gets after it pretty quick. So if you've got some gnarly grain, this does a really nice job on it. Anytime you've got like a long length, it's just the same as hand planing. You won't try to flatten a board with this guy because it's going to ride in the, in the valleys and stuff. It's not going to cut across it and cut those peaks down. So you got to be careful with that. Same deal with this. You can get away pretty quick. but a lot of times this will do the job pretty fast. It has a really coarse, I think a hacksaw blade's almost, a very coarse on one side and a finer on the other. I'll see if I can get that so you can kind of see it. They're pretty cheap. And so I'll just kind of have at this. Kind of got the camera in the wrong place, but that's okay. I'm just creating a facet. So all I'm doing is creating like a facet going across. And again, I like using this when it's kind of a gnarly wood and it just gets real aggressive and you can get after it. You can, of course, do it with this guy. Sometimes I'll set up 2 hand planes, one with a coarse cut, one with a finer cut, so I can get there quicker. But then I'll take it down to my line, my baseline. And I can use the finer side. Right, so you can kind of see, I've just got this big facet now. Now I'm going to hit this high point and try to just blend that over a little bit as I go. And then that gets the main shape.
When you say the baseline, you're talking about the center line that you put down the middle. Is that right?
No, really, the baseline here. So I had an offset line just at the very bottom here. That was probably an 1/8 inch or so. And so I just went to that line. My center line, I know is gone. Like there's a little part of it here still. And so that's more of a reference if I'm doing multiple of them. So a lot of times I'll do this portion on one, do that to all 4, 6, 10, whatever it is. And then I'll go through to the next portion. That way I can stay consistent. If I just try to take this all the way to a shape I like, I'll have a hard time trying to copy that because I won't know exactly the offsets and stuff since I'm not setting up gauges. You could set up gauges, but typically I don't. I'm just going to use my thumb and finger and just mark them out. So those are more reference points for doing multiple. It just helps. So now I can come across and get, I'm going to see if I can turn this camera around because I'm kind of facing backwards here. One sec. Let's see. All right. You can see that, right?
Yep.
All right, that feels,
yeah.
that feels better.
Feel free to get us as close as you want. We can be able to see well with the cell phone camera.
Sweet. There you go. All right. So now I'm just hitting that kind of like the apex, what I create on the top there. So I'm just going to start flattening that down.
Hey, Philip, on this second part of the curve, are you using the fine or the coarse side?
No, coarse side. So every time I'm trying to take down the mass, the bulk of it, I'm going to use the coarse, and then I'm going to switch back to the fine. So now I've kind of got the general shape, so I'm going to go back to the fine. Now I'm going to kind of rock this thing back and forth as I go. Because I've established somewhat of the shape, but it's still facets, right? So now I need to blend those facets. It's all about making them like smaller facets as you go.
Philip, you mentioned that tool specifically being great for some squirrely grain, but do you change the tools that you're using based on the wood, or you would use all the same tools no matter what?
No, I will change up depending on the wood, kind of see the feedback the wood's giving you, if it's giving you a hard time and stuff. The thing with this, there's no grain direction you have to think about when you use a rasp like this. So if I were to go at it with a spoke shave, but then the grain's kind of switching on me and it's just tearing up, then I'm going to switch over to something like this. Now, I have kind of got used to just using, I tend to just go for this one a lot. I enjoy it. It's pretty fast. But typically it is, if I'm starting out with a block plane or a spoke shave, like a flat bottom spoke shave like this guy, and the grain's just giving me a hard time, then, that's kind of like sanding, right? It's sanding kind of dumbs it down, and it just makes it where sanding's wonderful. If there's crappy grain, sandpaper doesn't care. So that's what that's for. But now, if you were to look down this, I mean, that's the thing too. A lot of times you're always checking with your eye. And if you were to look down it, it's a little bit wavy, right? Because I've gone at it with a, inch and a quarter thing. And I was putting it at an angle, which helps. You don't want to just go like this. But going at it at an angle does help that. But now it's all about taking a flat block to it and just keeping this hard line here and at the top, and then I'll do the final little ease on that. And that's where you can have a little fun. Like this right now, this is just doing this. You could do this and then kind of go over or put a little chamfer and try and make it, unique as you go. So these prepping weapons work really well. I have 4, excuse me, 5 of them with different grits already set up. So now I can use it like this, and I'll go ahead, mark this up so I kind of know where I'm at.
Is that brand name actually Prepping Weapons, or that's just
no,
British
it is
colloquialism?
It's Prepping Weapon. These are Prepping Weapons too, right there. You see that? No, yeah, it's the goofiest name ever. But I hope I'm not lying to you. I think they're time saver tools. I'm pretty sure they're called Prepping Weapons. Don't drop it. All right, so I just marked it up with some pencil, with some lead, so I can kind of see what I'm doing. Because I don't want to dub this edge over. I want to keep that as a hard edge. So I'm going to kind of start uphill from it and then work down. So going back and forth, which you won't be able to see, but when I'm doing this, when I go back and forth, I'm seeing the lead kind of disappear, and then I'm working it down until I hit this edge. And once I notice the lead kind of disappearing, I know I've kind of met that intersection between the bottom and that profile.
What grit are you starting with?
Just 120. So as I'm going, I'm kind of rocking it up as I'm working the whole edge. And now for the next hour of this class, I'm just going to sand. No.
So, Philip, this seems pretty easy to do in your vise with that size piece, but if you were doing this curve on a bookshelf and you had a much larger panel,
right?
How'd you go about doing clamping that and holding it down and get on top of that edge?
So kind of the same deal, but I'll just use my whole bench. So at the end there, I have like a clamp, and so I'll just have it, clamping on that whole thing or standing upright. You get kind of creative to be able to make it work. A lot of times, and I'm going to show you a bigger profile, it usually is in components still. So if it's on a bookcase and it's like a top, like almost think about like crown molding, it's still in segments, it's still in parts. So you can kind of get creative clamping on your bench and stuff, or just build small stuff. So once I've gone through those grids, and I don't know if I need to go through a lot of grids, but I'll pencil it up again, and just go, quickly through the grids. One thing I want to say about sandpaper is a lot of times people start at too low of a grit. I absolutely love sandpaper. You know, people give me stick, you know, hey, you know, 'cause it's usually with flat parts, I hand plane. So I'll sharpen my hand planes. I absolutely love this guy, which is kind of new to me, H&T Gordon. I think it's a 60-degree angle, and I'm not a guy that really knows much about angles and stuff, but it works really, really well. And I got this from Heartwood Tools, and I love this guy. So the thing I do with flat pieces, I'll come off my planer. My planer will be very sharp, come off, and then it's one hit with the hand plane, or maybe two, and then it's 220, 320. And I'll have people say, why would you bother with that if the hand plane's set up real nice? But I can never get it as nice as maybe I would want to. And I use conversion varnish, and that just works really well. So I sand. I mean, I have several machines that just sand. So the big thing though is not wasting time on a low grit. Like you need to, the coarser grit is just getting through the junk. It's getting through the machine marks. It's getting through the tear out. You want to get through that as quick as possible. And then from that point on, all you're doing is cutting the grits. So if you know, I had 120, all I'm doing with this 180 now is I'm not going to be working as hard. It's going to be a lot quicker because all I'm doing is trying to cut down the scratches of the 120, making them smaller and smaller and smaller as I go. And so when I teach, I see people, they grab 180 and they should be going to like 80 grit. So the nice thing about this on this size, if this was a much longer piece, I probably wouldn't guide it with this because I'll have a hard time keeping it true. I say that, I have done it, but I'd probably use like my smoother or my jack plane and get after it, or I'll show you a technique. I'll use the actual joiner for that, like my 8-inch joiner. So the one thing I do want to point out with this, so you can kind of see, let's see if I can get in there. So you can kind of see that profile, right? And so it's kind of just a nice little profile. I would probably ease this edge back over just a little bit. But one thing that works really well when I do this is a piece of cardboard, believe it or not. So I want to put 220 on this guy. So this is from like the back of a notepad. All my notepads in the house, my wife's notepads have no backs to them anymore. This stuff works really well. I wish I knew, I probably could go Hobby Lobby and find out, you know, something that would work. But it works well because it's thin enough, but it's dense, and it just holds, it gives enough rigidity to it, right? To where it's not gonna just blob over this edge. It's still gonna, you can maintain it. So it works pretty well for that. So I will use this for stuff like this, and I'll kind of almost hold this up so that, again, I'm not blobbing over. Right? If I just went at it, I slapped it on and just started going, these hard lines are gone. And I really think that's what makes a good piece, is maintaining the hard lines. Even if it's a, you know, I see people that say they do organic furniture and it's sculptural and stuff. Sculptural doesn't mean it needs to just all blur together. Sam Olof, I'm probably saying that name wrong. You know, everyone knows his rocking chairs. He was the master at maintaining hard lines. Even with as sculptural as his pieces were, he would continue a hard line all the way through his piece. And it just showed like how much of a master he was, like that he maintained that. And it makes it just draws your eye in, and you know someone was skilled to do that. And really, just the average person doesn't know anything. They just know they like it. They can't tell you why. It's only us woodworkers geeks. So you can see how well that works. And again, as I'm doing it, I'm kind of holding up the edge so it's not just going right over. And then I can come and hit this edge a little bit. I'm just easing that, breaking that edge. So that's just a real, you know, simple profile you'll see on a lot of my stuff. You know, I like it. It's kind of my preference. You know, very James Cronovian, I guess. he would do a little more of a snake back a lot of times. So let's see. All right. Sorry, the computer crapped out. I don't know why that happened. It's fully charged and it says it's got full connection, but my Wi-Fi is pretty bad. I'm a poor woodworker. So are there any questions before I just keep rambling and keep going on with that?
If you guys have any questions, throw them in the chat and I'll ask Philip.
And again, you know, like I just went through this pretty quick. You can get fast at it, but the sanding is where you want to take your time.
You're doing great, Phil.
Well,
That's the only comments we got.
We could just finish it right there. Just end it. End it.
What's the secret of for edge grain?
Oh, for edge grain, end grain, edge grain or end grain?
They said edge grain. Do you mean in? Okay, yeah, they meant
okay.
in grain.
Honestly, it's much of the same. Nothing's really different. I mean, the thing. Okay, so this guy, this works really well with edge grain, right? Because it's not going to want to tear out. So you could get kind of down and dirty, get it done very quick with this guy. Obviously, you need to have sharp, you know, spoke shave, block planes, whatever you're using, low angle. That's going to work really well. But it's the sanding. It's just spending the time and sanding and getting after it. And it's a hard thing. It takes a while to train your eye what to look for. So obviously I teach a lot. So it's hard sometimes when you're trying to show people like, look, you see how it's a little bit cloudy? You haven't really gone, or you tell them, what grid are you on? You're on 240. Because that's the killer. Like as soon as you get to the high grid, that's when you should really tell if you did a good job at the low grids, which sucks because they never want to go back to the low grid. So they'll spend, you know, an hour at the high grid and they might get there, but they're going to hate themselves. And I'll come over and be like, you didn't do it well enough at the low grid. So you need to go back to 100. And that drives them nuts. But you want to spend the time on the lower grid and work through your problems. And that's machine marks, tool marks, whatever it is, get that done. And then from that point on, it's quick.
So what would that range of sandpaper grits be? Like, what would you go up to?
Typically, again, it's all about, you know, the machine surface that you're getting. So my machines are pretty sharp. I sharpen everything. So that's important to me because that saves me time. So when it comes off a machine, I know it's sharp. Now, if I'm just from scratch, like with the rasp, with this guy going at it, then I'll probably start with 100. So 100, 120, 180, 220, 320. And that's as high as I go because I'm using conversion varnish. I'm not using oil. You probably want to go higher if you're doing like an oil finish. But conversion varnish, 320, any higher than that, you're going to get into trouble. Some people stop at 220, but 320 seems to work well with me. And I'll, you know, again, with end grain, depending on the profile, if it's a big profile, like to the top of a cabinet, like we'll talk about little small things right now. I'll do much of the same procedure, but then I'll go at it with an orbital sander too. And I'll be rocking that orbital sander back and forth and just really being methodical about it and trying to maintain that line. I even have like a big edge sander, and sometimes I'll just go over there and kind of rock. Like a lot of this, I would do on the edge sander. I'll just go over and rock it back and forth on my edge sander, and I can show you that. But it is just taking the time. I can grab a piece of end grain and show you a little bit on that, and maybe even coming off the machine. Because when it comes off the machine, it's not like it's ready for finish. I mean, you all know that it takes a lot of time still sanding. So what I think I'm going to do now, let's see. I kind of want to show something a little bit bigger in a lighter material. Let me see what I got. Hang on.
Philip, with the type of wood you're using, the pencil lines, do you ever use colored pencils or chalk or anything to mark those out?
Yeah, so walnut's kind of a beast. I was using, I think that like seamstress pencils. It's like a wax, I guess. It doesn't seem to work that well. So usually I'm just going to use pencil. My eyes are still pretty good. They're getting worse, but pencil seems to work just fine for me. I've seen sometimes actually I have like a red pencil, like a wax pencil, and that works well. But it's not a fine line. It's more of a guideline because those wax pencils are never going to be very fine. Not the ones I've ever seen. The kind of a heavy line. But yeah, it can be difficult to use. If I'm doing dovetails, that's the only time I use blue tape. It's on dark grain because I have a hard time seeing it. And so the blue tape works well for that kind of stuff. So this is, a piece of like 1 3/4 stuck. And I kind of wanted to show this a little bit, how I would profile this. And I'm going to do it more as a hybrid. Maybe what I'll do is I'll do the edge grain as a hybrid way, and then try to match it around the end grain, but do that, with hand tools at the bench, since I don't want to show you how I would do that on a machine because it might be a little sketchy. So let me see. So a few things that I do when I'm doing stuff like this. So I can situate this camera again, right in my face.
Before you hop into that, someone did ask about conversion varnish, and
oh yeah,
since that is a whole separate topic and class and religion for that point, give us the 10-second explanation of what is conversion varnish and how is it different than Waterlux or Old Masters varnish.
I'll kind of give you my lame cop-out explanation. A lot of what I do is I do it because it works and it's how I was taught how to do it. That may not be the best thing. So conversion varnish is what I know, and that's why I kind of stick with it. It's also very durable, right? So my furniture, my clients are not of that thought of refinishing their furniture. The downside with conversion varnish is if it does get damaged, it's a film finish and it's very, very difficult to refinish. You can't touch it up. So that's that balance you have to take. And it also will probably give you cancer. All my health issues are probably related to conversion varnish. So I like it. I like the look it gives. It is a whole nother blessing, another thing. Like, I've seen people use it and they do a terrible job where it's too heavy. It's really important to keep it light coats. A lot of my end grain, a lot of times people think I use oil, but it's conversion varnish, but I build it up in light coats. So I'm not just smudging that finish over it.
Cool.
But as far as like people ask me, what is conversion varnish? I actually don't even know what the conversion means in conversion varnish. I know it's a finish that's used in high production cabinet work, but it's a sprayed, so it's kind of like a lacquer, but it's more durable than lacquer. I used to use lacquer, pre-cat lacquer. Yeah.
Lacquer's rude uncle.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
it's
thanks.
pretty amazing. It's amazing stuff, but it is pretty gnarly. And you got to have spray equipment and all the rest of it. All right, so I'm going to do this in pen, so maybe you can see it better. So, let's just say hypothetically, this is going to be almost a top cap to a cabinet, like a little crown molding. A lot of times what I'll do, and I'm going to say this, but I'm going to kind of back up and tell you not to get crazy, because I drive engineers and architects nuts because they always want to know the number, and a lot of times I don't know the number. I just do what looks good to me. So something like that, right? I don't have any numbers or anything except for the thickness, and so I just kind of laid out a shape that I liked and did the negative, or I don't know if that's negative, part of that shape. And so something like this helps you maintain that profile throughout the piece. So like Austin was saying, if it's a big long piece, how do you maintain that? So this, you would basically put down on that edge and go back and forth and then hit the highs and stuff where you need to work a little more. Now, you don't want to go nuts with this. This is to get it close. Your eye can pick up a lot, but sometimes people get a little bit crazy, especially where, oh, the two sides are not identical. It's like they're going to be 8 feet apart. Like, they're good. Like, no one's picking up on that. If you can never bring them back together and match them. No one's going to go get a mold, put it on there, let it dry, then go and test it and be like, what the heck, Phil? They're different. Start trusting your eye more. I think it's the big thing with any of this. It's really important. You don't need 30 pieces of woodpecker layout tools. I hope I'm not offending anyone there. I'm just jealous because I actually do want some. But honestly, like, you don't. You got your fingers and a pen. It gets you there pretty quick. So what this will do is it will allow me to basically check myself. So I'm just going to come mark the edge, and this, I'll kind of mark it and I'll show you how I'm doing it. But this little flange allows me to line it up perfectly. All right. So let's see if I can get the camera in here. All right. Yeah, so can you see that edge right there? The black line? All right, perfect. So that's what this, the edge has for, right? So it hooks on. And so now, I just came and marked that, but that's what I would check. As I go down this piece, I can check with this and make sure it's right. You can kind of go down, and I haven't done this in a long time, but with that same kind of notion, I've done it with Bondo, packing tape, and you make yourself a mold to use as a sanding block. I haven't had to do anything like that in a long time. I used to do restorational work in London, so I had to do that a lot. You had a piece of scrap molding that was done 200 years ago, and you had to match it. So you'd bundle, packing tape it, bundle the heck out of it, make a form. Then you go get knives, cut to that, and you can also use it as a sanding form. So luckily, I don't have to do that kind of work anymore. But basically, from that edge, I will just come and, right, so there's my baseline. And so I'll just scribe that line across. And then I've got a little guy at the top there. So I'm just going to come here, line it up. I'm going to scribe that down the edge. And then I want to give me some like point of reference. So probably right about there. I'm just going to come in and scribe that across. And so those would be the lines that I can go to. Now, this is actually it's not that radical. But I'm going to go and I'm going to kind of show you how I would deal with this if I'm doing a lot of this. So I'm going to grab this, hopefully this works, and take you to the joiner. So be prepared to get seasick. Give you the shop tour. My messy shop. All right, let's see. I can get set up over here.
That joiner looks a little dusty there, Philip.
Oh yeah, it is big time. I only use hand tools, So let me get this guy down a little bit. Oh, look at that action. And let's see if I can come in. And let's see. Yeah, I think that would probably work there. All right, so this is long enough, so don't get scared. Any shorter than this, I probably wouldn't run across my joiner. So basically what I'm gonna do is I can see my profile, my edge, my joiner is unplugged. And now I can loosen this guy, and I'm just gonna rock this. And it's gonna be a little awkward because usually I'll be looking where you're looking, and I'll kind of look this way and kind of somewhat make it sense to the table. But we're gonna wing it. And so I'm just trying to get the mass, get it out of my way so I don't have to spend time at the bench. So it's going to be loud. I'm going to turn the joiner on, okay? So I'm going to raise it up. All right.
Looks good.
All right, so now, that's probably as close as I want to get it right there, right, to that point. And now I can hit this point, and this point, and it'll give me there pretty quick. So again, I'm just eyeballing.
So Philip, say you don't have a joiner in your garage shop. What would be your next choice for that?
What are you doing with your life? I mean, again, like this, what I'm pointing out here is how I will get to this fast. Nothing changes. If I didn't have this joiner, it'd be at the bench and I'll be using a hand plane. If it's long, it'd be a jack plane. And I'll just be heavy cut, going at it, doing exact same things I'm doing right now, but just at the bench. So yeah, just a jack plane. And I've done it many, many times that way. But when you start doing this as a living, quotation marks up in the air, living, you need to think kind of efficiencies, how to get it faster. Typically, I won't be turning it on and off, but so you're just creating facets, right? And so although I'm doing it over here, you would be doing it with your hand plane.
So this would be the same if you're doing several pieces, that you would do all of one facet on all the pieces, then move it.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's the thing. I remember early on that I just didn't get that. I'll get excited about a profile and I'll just go at it and I'll do it. I'm like, yeah, it looks freaking awesome. And I'm like, oh crap, how did I get there? It's like, wait a minute. So yeah, I'll be methodical about sending them all through at the same time, probably doing heavier cuts. Because the thing with a joiner, the whole purpose of joiner is to get things flat, right? And doing an edge flat. So as you know, if you try to keep going on it, sometimes you can end up taking more, you can end up making like a wedge shape. And so the same thing's here. If you're having to take 30 passes, one end may be getting more than the other end, depending on how you're shifting your weight. And so you really want to try to get it there as fast as possible by making deeper cuts and taking lesser passes, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm just going to do one more there. And another way I would probably approach this, I'm going to put it here so I can see the angle. If I didn't have a joiner, a table saw. So a lot of times, I used to do this on a table saw, but I kind of hate messing with table saws and getting things thrown back at you and stuff. But table saw will do it. Tilting the blade back and forth. All right, so that's probably good enough. Won't bore you too much, but you can kind of see I've just followed that, profile, and now I can go to my bench and finish that off. like I mentioned before, I do have the luxury of an edge sander. So for something small, I'll just go to that guy and just, rotate it back and forth freehand. And I'll get it there really fast and it'll come out beautiful. Bigger pieces, not so much. It'd just be hard to control. All right, so I'm gonna set you guys up, sorry. Let me see. All right, so probably somewhere like that. But yeah, so now it's just finishing it off by hand. And, I'm gonna actually maybe one more time. Now, I'm surprised no one's mentioned how comes I have a left-handed bench and I'm right-handed, but my bench is set up as a lefty. All right, that works better. So again, it's just facets, right? So I've got all these high points I need to knock down. And so I would just mark it up. I wouldn't go at it with this guy, or even a spoke shave. Like you could definitely, work that down, but you just got to make sure you're taking even passes, so you're not ending up like, distorting that shape. But you can, definitely get after it with a spoke shave. Works really well. But I'll probably use this guy, because it has a bigger footprint. It's going to do a better job. I'll have more control over it. And so I'm just kind of hitting highs right now. So I'm just creating more facets. But as I'm going, I'm watching my pencil line. I'm coming down, I'm rucking it down to the baseline again. So I'm seeing my pencil lines disappear and it's like stop. And as soon as I get there, I'll stop. And then I can go back and work it to the top. All right, so I'm just kind of knocking those facets down, working them out. And this way you'd come in here and see how horrible you're actually doing. And you bring that guy and it's like, okay, I see some highs and lows. And it actually really shows well. I don't know if you can, so I get you closer.
Philip, would there be a way to somehow use that as a marking tool as well? I don't know if there's... If you put lead
in here, and so a lot of times if you rub some graphite or put a piece of graphite paper in between it, you can do that, and then kind of rest that down, and then rub it. But you probably want more like graphite or something. But it's leaving lead on these high points here, so hair and hair. And so yeah, you can definitely, and I'll do that. I'll kind of go through, mark that up like that. Or, just, again, when you go, you're basically looking at it and it's like pretty easy. You can see, okay, this is high, this is high. And so now I'm just going to work those down. And I'm not looking to absolutely match this, but it gives me a good indication of how, how things are going. And you got to be pretty methodical if you're really trying to match that. Probably not teach a line on teach online doing it. But that's already starting to feel a little bit better. Yeah, so it's I've dove off a little bit. is once I've got this, it's where it feels pretty good with the cardboard and really trying to get it going.
Hey, Philip, your video paused for a second. Philip, can you hear us?
Use your hand. Feel the wood. I don't know if this thing's even set up.
Philip, are you able to hear us?
Cut. How much time do we have? I want to make sure I'm not missing out on anything.
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
Oh, crap. For real? Dang, that went by fast.
Well, we'll take off a few minutes from the technical difficulties. So yeah we can go over
let me show you, you know, the kind of the luxury of a bit with the bearing on it. And then I'm going to show you, excuse me, the bit without a bearing. Unfortunately, my son is saying maybe it'll be okay.
Would you ever use a card scraper on the techniques you were showing?
No, not really. Like that's me personally. So when I was in Florida, we used to do a lot of veneer work, and a lot of veneer was pretty thick but kind of gnarly. We used to do profiles and stuff, and there we would actually grind our own scrapers out of glass, out of flat glass, and then you tape it, and it worked. It was kind of weird. Every now and then it break, but it worked pretty well. So for that kind of thing, because you couldn't go at it with a hand plane, because it was thick as far as veneer goes, but it was pretty gnarly still. So we had to like clean it up and then build up the finish on it. But you know, again, yeah, you can. It's a preference thing. It's what you're used to. I don't think I've ever actually done it on solid wood. Let's see. So I was trying to see if I can, this bit may be too thick, but I can get a thinner piece. So, you know, again, nice thing with a bearing, it's a center bearing, it's going to ride there. So it's going to leave a little flat, but then you can blend that flat in, because essentially all we're doing is blending flats, right? I mean, that's what we've been doing for the last hour and a half. So that sun, the sun is like right in my freaking eye.
Yeah, we can see all right. As long as
you can see all right. Yeah, I was like, I can't see, but
what's more important, us seeing or you seeing?
I know, right? All right, just want to make sure. Yeah, so you know, I can engage that bit on that bearing. A lot of times I'll bury this fence, but I'll put a custom fence on here so that I'm not trying to. The important thing is you're not trying to like come to the center of that bearing, because what's going to happen is if you try to get it and you go a little ahead of it, it's going to kick. And so that's what's kind of scary. That's where a starter pin works really well. So that's probably what I'll use here. My fence, this fence is not tall enough to go over the spit. So usually I'll have like a 2x4 here that I would clamp on.
Mm-hmm.
But just for this demo, I'll just put this little starter pin in here. If you're not familiar with starter pins, you really need to get familiar with them because they are fantastic. Very simple tool, but basically the notion is you start on the starter pin, you rotate, you engage the bearing, you start, and then you come off the starter pin. And I don't know if you can, let me see if I can kind of, yeah, so you can see it right there, right? So you're gonna come, you engage that, pivot into the bearing, and then start cutting. And that way it prevents that bit, it prevents you from almost getting on the back side of that bit where it's going to kick and scare the living heck out of you. So that works pretty well. Good safety feature. All right. And so again, works really well because you're just going to come straight in. We are going to ride on this bearing. That's what's unique about this bit. And I'm going to use almost that entire profile. So I'll just show you what that looks like. I'm going to make some noise.
So it looks like the flat portion is even bigger than that bearing. Is that right?
Yeah, it is, because what you have is you have the two cutters coming together and then that bearing. So it's kind of, it does this, then it's almost flat, and then it does that. But that little flat area there takes nothing to blend in as a whole piece. It's pretty quick and it works really well. The nice thing with a bit like this is on a smaller piece, because this one's actually a little too thick, you don't have to use the entire portion. So let me show you. I'm going to grab another piece. So kind of like that shelf I was telling you, showing you the one I did by hand. This is how I've actually just been doing this all day. I just moved my setup. This is how I do it. So I'll get it where it's just engaging that bearing. So it's going to leave a little bit of a flat at the very top. And it's very subtle, which I actually prefer. Some of these I've been showing you a little heavier than I would prefer to do on my furniture. Now, it's a big ass bit sticking out there, right? So that's a lot of place where you can get your fingers caught in. So when I'm doing stuff like this, when I teach, I usually have a guard set up that's going to overhang and cover it and just try and make it as safe as possible. You just don't want to take any chances. Let me grab a push block. But I'll use this for several different profiles. Right, so makes pretty quick work of it instead of going at it by hand. And it doesn't look super. It doesn't look super machined. Because it's kind of offset. I tend to like that bit a lot. Let's see.
Yeah,
So,
that's nice. You can even have a little bit of artistic license on a machined bit,
exactly.
How far up and down you want it.
Yeah, and that's what I like about that. And again, that's what I try to get people to think a bit different about. Is just because that's a 3/4 round over doesn't mean you have to think about approaching this conventionally where, that's on a table and you're stuck flat on the table going at it. You can make a ramp, tilt it, do different things with this and use portions of that. And this actually makes a really nice thumbnail edge when you tilt it because it's only about an 1/8 inch depth of cut. You want to keep away from bullnose fits unless you're doing staircases or you like it. I mean, if you like it, that's fine. But something like that, it's a pretty dramatic, it's probably like a 1/4 inch. So that I have this, I've never used this particular one, but again, you can use portions of it, right? So if you've got thinner stock, raise and lower it, it can make a really nice look. It can almost do like at the top, it rounds it and then goes back underneath. So that can, just think a little different about your bits. Don't let your bits predict the edges that you're trying to do.
You don't happen to have any pictures of the ramps you used, did you, by chance?
I don't. It was pretty scary. Actually, on my IG, on my Instagram feed, you'll see a student with a big old piece because he's doing the end grain sticking up in the air. But it's just a 45-degree ramp that sits on the table, and it takes a little bit of setup, but it worked just fine. So, I kind of wanted to show. Let me turn my camera around real quick. But it's kind of the same deal when I'm working on hair. So I'm using those bits for this. And you can see, because I'm going real slow, so there's burnout. So it's going to take a lot of sanding to get there. But I'll start with real heavy grit, maintaining this hard line, the inside-outside hard line. When I say hard, it shouldn't cut you. At 220, I ease the edge, but I'm not lobbing it over. Same deal though, that same bit did all these different thicknesses. So that little subtle edge that most people will never pick up on, this is like a French cleat almost. And so it's kind of been used, there's all the shelves. And so that works pretty well. The other thing I wanted to kind of show, and we can do a piece of end grain if we want to, but it's really not much difference in do an end grain. Oh, let me grab the phone.
On the end grain, though, whether it's the router bits or the hand tools, do you and how would you deal with
blowout? So you're always going to go, all right, so let's say I was going to do, these are not trued up. So if I was going to do all 4 edges, the way you're going to start is with the end grain. And so you're going to do that cut. It's going to blow out on that face there, right? Then you're going to come this way. That cleans that up. You're going to go through. You've cleaned that blow up. And then you're going to do the same. You're going to cut that. So that's anti-clockwise. You're going to do that, blow out, and then that cleans it. Does that make sense? So you're working your way around. So every time it blows out, you're cleaning it back up. Now, the beauty about these type profile bits, I didn't have that luxury, right? So on these, there's no blowout because I don't have the luxury. I'm not going all the way around. And so the nice thing about this, the geometry of that cut, the way it approaches, it's almost like a share cut. You just slow down at the end and it almost folds the end grain over. It doesn't blow it out. It's pretty amazing how well those bits cut because of the curvature of it instead of being like a big straight blade just smacking it. But yeah, you always want to get in that habit, working your way around.
So would you do the same order of operations with hand tools?
Yeah, I'll do the same with hand tools. You're going to work that end grain because it's going to blow out a little bit on the edges, and then you're going to clean it up, going with the grain. And so this bit here I want to show because I've seen, actually a student recently in a class asked me, why did you do it this way? And I guess I didn't explain what I was doing. So with this, think of it like a joiner. We can take a full cut. We can take a freaking 1/4 inch past the cut. Like we can make a big old cut on this board, right? On the edge. And so what I do is I'll set my straight knife in there, my straight edge, and I'll set that in there until, it's kind of hard to see, there's a little daylight between the edge and the low point of that bit. Meaning as I come through, the flat, the edge of this is still there. And so that's going to ride up against this fence still. If you try to take that whole profile, this needs to make up the difference. So you have to, stick on a shim, if that makes sense. Like, let's say you do the math, you go in and match it to this ruler, you're taking off a 32nd, then you have to have something that's a 32nd on this side. So when it goes through, it's catching it just exactly the same as a joiner. And as it comes through and it finishes, it doesn't drop in, right? That's the telltale sign. Joiners are wonderful until they don't work well. But as you go through a joiner, if you're getting sniped at the end, then your outfeed table's too low. And so it's going through and it drops. All right, so that's the telltale sign. So it's the same deal here, and that's why a lot of woodworkers don't get into shapers, and I understand. But this fence over here has a micro adjustment on the outside table, so I can actually use this this shaper as a joiner, and so this adjusts independently from the front one, and that's the reason, to make up the difference. So you would just come in, a few inches past the cutter, stop, turn it off, bring it back, and then move the fence to match it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I got that. If you guys have questions about that, asking the questions in the chat.
All right, so I'll run this piece just to kind of show you the edge. I actually like this bit, the way I've got it set up. So let me put my phone back in its fancy little tripod.
We just need to get you a chest harness.
I know, right? Jeez, I don't even know where my thumbs are. Sorry. So professional. I just fake it on Instagram. I don't actually do any of the video stuff. All right. Let's see. Have you got your t-shirt yet? What? All right, so So if I get a good angle.
Before you do that, how
Yep.
often would you use the shaper versus the router table to get those profiles?
The profiles that I showed you, probably not that often, except for the one roundover that I would tilt, because my shapers, I have two shapers, and they're both tilting arbors, and so that opens up a whole new realm of how to use bits. Even like a straight bit, do 45, you can do different angles. What I did on the joiner, I would do on my shaper, because it's easier than taking the stock. If it's laying down, it works better. Kind of like a lot of times people edge boards and they have them standing up, where I like to lay them down and use it more like doing it as a shooter, like shooting the board with my plane laying on its side. I have more control over it tipping and stuff. But for these type of edges, not that often. And keep in mind, like with what I do, I want as many options and as many different ways to do things, because I don't typically do the same thing again and again. Now I have certain items I do. So if I'm going to set up a run of my lounge chairs, when I set up again and I do a profile like that, I do it on the shaper. The shaper is going to deliver a much better cut than a router. It's all about the diameter of the cutter, right? Like it's the bigger diameter of the cutter, the machine itself is just a lot heavier, less vibration, run out, all that kind of stuff. So the cut is pretty amazing. So yeah, but for small things like these T-Rex and stuff, no. And I've got another cabinet over here that's I'm going to be doing pretty soon, and it's going to have this profile, and it will all be done by hand, because it's a expensive cabinet, and that's what the client is looking for. And it's one time that I'm doing it, and so I want to enjoy the experience too. So nothing too exciting, but I'm just going to set this guy. I'm going to run it and show you like the profile you can get. All right, so I'm going to make noise, a lot of noise. And so, I mean, it's actually a pretty nice little profile. There you can kind of see it's a little more asymmetrical than it first looks. But you can see, it's hard to see, but there's still a flat left in this. And that's why, let's see, there's still a flat right there. And so when this goes through, I can push hair on this edge. I can push hair and it's not doing this because it's catching hair. So I'm going to run that all the way through real quick. And this is some pretty figured walnut that I'm cutting. And that bit does a really nice job. You can see the figure in that walnut. And so if you end up setting this up to where you're taking too heavy of a cut, let's see if I can mimic this without killing myself. So no flat, it did the whole thing and some. That's the issue with these bits, is there's no bearing. But now, if I come there and I push, it's rucking that end out, right? Because it's not, that's why I was trying to kind of show, like, that's where you need whatever that space is between there, bigger than this ruler, but whatever that is, that you need to add that to the outfeed of this fence here. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's just something a student asked me recently. We were doing this, and he kind of, I did mention it to the class, but I don't think he was even there when I spoke about it. but he's like, hey, how comes we're not going all the way? Like, why wouldn't you just take it all the way? Saves us time. That's why. I just didn't want to go through that process of figuring out that shim, trying to add it to their router table. So Shaper fence works really well. And I think they probably sell router fences that have an offset. I'm sure they do. Woodpecker, one-time special, I think, going on right now. Any questions?
If you guys have any
Lost
questions,
everyone?
throw them in the chat.
Okay.
No, we're still here.
Okay. All right.
That was great.
What else? What else would we want to see? So, trying to think. I don't want to bore you guys because a lot of it is the same type of thing. Just playing around with different bits, getting different profiles, and just kind of having fun with it. I didn't really show any end grain. Would that be beneficial, me showing you how I deal with end grain?
Yeah, if you want to do a quick demonstration of the end grain, that'd probably be helpful.
Let's see what I have.
What's the brand of sandpaper you're using?
Maverick. No, it's 3M. So actually, I really like this stuff. It's the purple. It's a little bit sticky on the back. Works really well. Let me.
Here's a good question: is other than the thumbnail edges, do you use other profiles?
No, only thumbnail. No, yeah, you know, and thumbnail kind of puts it all underneath this category, but it's really not true. A thumbnail edge is a consistent, right? It's a symmetrical deal. This, it was actually sold as a thumbnail, which is almost a bullnose to me. But so that's what I call a thumbnail. So even though I'm using a thumbnail bit, I'm doing it in different profiles. So do I use different like geometry? Not that much. Sadly enough, I tend to keep with the same little pillowed look. But you can look through my pieces and you'll see, like, you know, it might come up and then wrap around a little bit. So they're all little subtle differences within that. But that, or just keeping edges very crisp, is typically what goes with my aesthetic. But again, it depends on the piece. So that happens in the design process, where if I'm doing something and I feel like this would be a cool look, whether it's, I like doing facets, like just weird facets coming in at different angles and stuff. Again, maintaining those hard lines. I like that look. But this definitely is my go-to. Like, people, I don't know if it's good or bad, but people tend to be like, hey, you know, piece by Phil, because it's got a thumbnail. And every student from, you know, I didn't go to College of the Redwoods, but I know it's a very Kronovian look, and that's what I like. So I think this is freaking rock maple, so this is probably the wrong thing to demo on, but what the heck. And so let's just do something here. I don't know what, but hang on a sec. So a piece of, you know, just end grain, rock maple. And again, you know, the first thing I'm going to do is take this in my hand and then try to find center. And so just eyeball it. And so I'm going to do that, pinching this down so I'm not moving it, then rotate again, and then come back and hit it bang on in the middle. Did you see that? Did you witness that? Are we recording this? That never happens. All right, so got that in the center. I like the look of that. That's just going to be a guideline again. So I'm just going to go all the way with it. You can use your marking gauge. You can use your little double square, combination square. And then I'm just going to do like an 1/8 inch, a very subtle thumbnail here. So I'm just going to do that. I keep putting it back in the bias, but I want to do that on that edge. And then again on that edge. And so that's going to give me kind of like my stopping points, and just helps me determine where I'm at with this. I'll probably, sorry, hang on. I'm gonna try to pinch it there and bring my little clamp over.
While you're doing that, Philip, when you have those small secondary edges, how would you quickly kind of break that edge or take it off so it's consistent?
Say that again.
So you have these big curves on one side, but then on the other, you have a secondary edge that's maybe real small. You're just kind of breaking the edge. What would you use to do that?
Oh, I would use a block. So, you know, something like just this, but with some 220. And I'll just simply, you know, I'll come in and just ease that over. But just, you know, it's still a hard line, but it's just broke with that 220, 320. Another thing I didn't point out, this just comes into Engrain, what works really, really well, is this flex paper, Gold Flex 320 foam paper. That works amazing on Engrain, especially with finishing. If you're using lacquers and stuff like that, it works really, really well. So, you know, with this, you know, this will probably be my choice of tool. The block plane, a spoke shave will get it too. But what you want to do, a lot of times when I'm doing this, instead of angling it this way, so if I pull this, you see how it's tearing out? You probably can't, but it's tearing out, right? Because I'm pulling those fibers down and out. And so I'm going to angle it upwards so that it's keeping it a little bit crisper. So this is actually a high angle, but you know, any one of these tools is going to get you, you know, where you need to be, just taking your time. This, you know, the Lee Nelson works real well for this kind of work. Let me get it set. Kind of working a little backwards. Let me turn this around. Let's see. The thing with tripods, they have those stupid legs that stick out and they keep getting in the way. All right, let me see if that will help. And so, you know, this obviously I'm going to be blowing out on this side. So I'll be cleaning that up doing the other edge. Or if it's something where it's only happening on the ends, I might leave this a little bit wider and then trim that off later on. And, you know, of course you can come from both sides if you need to. But for this, I'm just going to act like it doesn't matter out there. And so I'm just going to work my way down to that baseline. So this line here. And then I'm going to hit, you can see the point right there. So now I'm going to hit that apex. I'm going to back off a little bit because I'm taking a pretty heavy bite right now. And work my way to the center point. And I'm just going to work back and forth.
So someone mentioned this a little bit earlier about one of your chairs, but I don't know if it's your rocking chair or your lounge chair, but how would you achieve these types of curves on a curve on an edge?
So it'd be a spoke shave. It'll be a curved bottom spoke shave, and I can show you the one I like to use. And the rasp, so this guy. So curved rasp, so I'll get after with that, and then a lot of sandpaper. But yeah, so let's see, where's my other one? I have a Veritas somewhere, but this little guy works really well for that type of work. So you can really get into these tight radiuses, and I'll just use that kind of like I'm doing this block plane where I'm taking these little shavings until I get the shape I want. And then it just is a lot of, you know, creating a sanding block or that same deal with the cardboard and working that in. So I did it on the lounge chair. These T-Rex actually have it too, on that curve, because on the inside edges it curves in.
off a little bit. This is where, if I was doing a lot of this type of stuff, you know, I have another block plane, I'll probably just set both of them up. One with a coarse cut, one with a fine cut.
Great. Well, yeah, does anybody have any other questions about Ingrain or profiles?
All right, so that's close enough to the profile, just for argument's sake of like how to sand it. So again, if your block plane is dull, you're gonna be having a lot of trouble there. But nothing changes, it's just the same deal, you know, blocking it out. And you can see a lot in Ingrain. I can see tool marks still over there. I usually would go to the other side, but I'm gonna do a little left-hand work. But it's just really kind of being mindful of it and just inspecting it, making sure you're cutting through the machine marks or the hand plane marks. And that looks pretty good. So then it's just back to this, you know, this is really key for the Ingrain.
And if you do run into some crazy gnarly grain, do you ever dampen it or put alcohol on it to help deal with it?
Yeah, you can put a little solution of water, urine, and alcohol. It's got to be Fox urine though. I think that's what Frank Strauser uses. Don't tell him I told you. I'm teasing. Yeah, no,
Texas
just
foxes.
yeah, it's got to be. Yeah, just be nature alcohol and water. I've never ran into. I mean, I think I've done it like once or twice in my life, probably back at school. But I've never really ran into it where, you know, if your tools are not sharp enough, or changing the angles, low angle to higher angle, depending on what it is. And again, I'm a big sand guy, so, you know, this type stuff, I'll be over there on my edge sander and have this done in seconds. But I still enjoy, you know, doing it like this by hand. Put some good music on.
So that might be the next best question is what is your go-to sanding song?
It's just pure gangster rap.
All right.
So I have quite an oddest taste in music, but I will actually have like 90s roots reggae. I've really liked playing reggae. I grew up in London, pretty close to Brixton, big Jamaican community. My social worker was Jamaican, and he introduced me to a lot of reggae music. So I'm bad at remembering names, but
there you have it, people. If you listen to reggae while doing woodworking, your edge profiles will come out like Philip Morley's.
Yeah, no, you got to have some pumping music. No classical. Come on. No, blues, jazz, some good old honky tonk. I mean, I'm not picky. I don't know if you can get it. See, can you kind of see?
It's a bit hard to see from above, but
yeah, I was trying to show the cloudiness of it, but where you can see like on these outside edges, it's a wider look. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of wider on the outside edges, and then it's just a lot cleaner on the inside there, and that's kind of knowing the sand pattern. Like you haven't gone far enough with that grit yet. So like with this guy, since I'm backing off the edge, so I need to come out to that edge. I'm gonna try it. I'm almost done, guys. I'm almost done. I'm gonna skip a little bit, but all right. So now that was 220. I actually skipped 180 altogether. Look at that. Why I've been wasting my time with freaking 180. So now this foam paper works really, really well. Sometimes I'll still kind of fold it in the cardboard.
So is there a reason why it seems like it would make more sense to we're going to go back to kindergarten, fold it hot dog style as opposed to what looks like you're kind of going opposite hamburger style?
What in the world are you talking about?
Oh yeah, you didn't get to school here.
No, I didn't go to school.
You've got the long way of the paper perpendicular.
Oh yeah. So instead of like doing this?
Yeah. Is there a reason for that?
No, not really. Okay. Just grabbed it. Now I will say, if you're doing edge sanding and your paper is going like this, it can get caught underneath the edge. You need to watch out for that, to where you might want to go the other way so that this is always leading. But for this, I think I just grabbed whatever felt right.
Mm-hmm.
But I have had it where I've done this, and I've gone, oh, son of a gun, it peeled up a piece of grain underneath it.
Okay.
All right, yeah. So, I mean, that's looking, I wish you guys could see this. So nice, I feel it. But that's looking pretty sweet. The last thing I'm gonna show you, this trick has been handed down to me and my family. I don't tell anyone about this. Shavings, and then get after it. And all you're doing, this is just for that Instagram shot, right? Just that glamour shot where you're like, oh yeah, look at that. And people are like, man, that looks like glass. But then I have to scuff it again before I finish it. Because my finish is not gonna stick to it. All right. I'm gonna take you out so I can get the close up. Let me see if I can turn it around. Look at my ugly mug. Let's see. All right, and one thing I didn't mention, is low raking light. So can you see that? You see how nice that looks? I mean, you can see how that light's reflecting off it, right? And so that's all it is. I mean, end grain, you just gotta work hard at it. But then the end result, I mean, speaks for itself. And that's something that people comment probably more than anything else on my stuff, is how I treat the edges. So just that extra time and love. But that works really well for that. So yeah. Any questions now that I'm all sweaty?
Well, that looks good. Well, if anybody has any more questions on edge profiles, ask them. Otherwise, I'll stop the recording and I'll let you guys unmute yourselves, and you can ask a question for a couple minutes here before we sign off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I know it's probably not the most exciting demo, but you know, honestly, you probably need to teach sanding more, because that is pretty key to furniture making and good finishes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been Introduction to Edge Profiles at the Austin School of Furniture and Design Online with Philip Morley.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.